Welcome to Breaking the Silence of Design. I'm your co-host, Karen Compton.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle Bullock. Welcome to Breaking the Silence.
So in our last episode, we started down a journey of kind of definitions. We talked in broad context about what is justice and equity and diversity and inclusion. And we started down kind of a pathway of defining institutional racism, structural racism, and really trying to start to untangle, if you will, some of the issues as they start to creep into leadership, particularly on the corporate side. And we talked a little bit about pay equity, for example, and what it means to actually have a seat at the table. But there's the other side of that too, which is the education piece. And so I kind of want to pick up the conversation and talk a little bit about education, talk a little bit about how high school education and college education also impacts architecture, and how can we make impact as firms and as individuals in that analysis, if you will. Is that a good place to kind of start?
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay, so here's my thought. Here's my question. So recently, LAUSD actually completed a study. I think it happened within the last 2 weeks. And they released a recent study that found that 27% of Black students and 26% of Hispanic students did not participate in online learning at all in this last quarter. And not only was that just heartbreaking, because they either lack the technology or the ability to learn in that way, it really became clear that without any intervention, the chasm of students of color is just going to grow larger. So what are your thoughts on how practices can respond to that disparity?
Yeah, well, I want to start with, COVID revealed a huge disparity between, communities of color being disproportionately impacted by the health pandemic called COVID. We're seeing the same thing in the digital divide. Not everybody learns the same. Not everybody is able to, whether it's elementary school, middle school, even high school and college, not everybody learns the same, and not everybody can excel in the same manner, particularly with remote learning. And so not every student has a laptop, or maybe there's one laptop for a family of 5 and there's 3 kids in the same middle school, right? So I think recognizing what we each can do to help fill that gap. One idea is firms, we lease technology, computers all the time. We trade them in, we buy them, we donate them. Why not donate them to students, right? There's going to be more and more remote learning moving forward, I think, at least in the short term. And so I think we can think of creative ways to help our students, our college students, our future architects, our future designers, the future graduates. The other thing I think that, we don't have to travel to mentor.
Yeah.
I don't have to get on a plane to go speak to a class.
That's so true.
Across the country. I could do it on Zoom. So I would encourage everybody who has the capacity to mentor students, high school, college, do it.
So it's funny you should mention that, because I was just thinking a very good friend of mine is actually a president of a university, and she was commiserating that she had not been able to get African American faculty, and her frustration had everything to do with the people that I find they're not in my own geography. I think that now in a COVID world, it doesn't really matter. You have the ability to impact another student, regardless of where you are in the globe, through any kind of internet platform. I think we just need to make sure that those schools, those students are equipped with the technology to be able to do it. And we have to be willing to make that commitment.
And we have to be willing to not forget about that commitment once we're on planes again and planes, trains, and automobiles.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a test for us as a profession, for sure.
But don't you think part of that
we can do it.
ultimately has to do with the creation of a culture?
Yes.
Really, truly creating a culture that says this is important?
Absolutely. If we believe that a more diverse profession is of value and we value it, then we are all willing to commit to make that happen. And that means building the pipeline. That means mentoring the pipeline. That means giving of yourself. Mm-hmm. And so, hopefully that commitment will not fall by the wayside once we're not in a pandemic, we're not shut down. I have to say, like I said in the last episode, this is a cosmic reset in my mind, and that it's now or never.
Yeah.
And if not now, then when?
Well, I'm going to say something that's wildly unpopular. Like that's a real shocker. I think that if we're going to call ourselves to be mentors and to really be invested in communities of color, and be invested, period, in communities, be part of the fabric that we claim to design for, I think we really have to look at our business models. Because as practices, oftentimes, and you've been in these conversations the same way that I have, we go in and we're gonna have a project meeting or a finance meeting, or we're gonna have a company meeting to kind of talk about finance, and the first conversation goes to utilization, and it goes to profit. I think there's an opportunity here to really step back for a moment. I'm not saying that you need to throw the entire business model out. We all understand what it is to work and to be profitable. I think we have to give ourselves breadth and depth in order to allow our teams, our people, to have that time to invest in their communities.
Absolutely. And you have to invest in your own culture.
Yeah.
And in the communities that you want to work in.
Yeah.
As much time as you spend planning the profit margin.
Yeah.
You have to, and how you're going to reach a design excellence and get that next design award, you must put as much energy into building the culture, because culture is about behavior. And it doesn't change just because you say we're going to be X moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you begin to even dissect culture within an organization?
Take a mirror. Ask some questions, some hard questions. Get some honest feedback.
I remember when you first took that position of global diversity, you and I went and had drinks. I'll never forget that. True story. We went and had drinks, and you said, I've been on a plane for the last, I think you had told me 2 weeks or something. And you said, I've just been doing a listening tour. And I think I was astonished, not that you did the tour, but that people were willing to put out there what their experiences were. And then that there was enough shift and support behind you and behind the organization to say, okay, now that we know this, we have to do something.
Absolutely. And I think my response to you then was, it was like somebody turned on the faucet.
Yeah.
I didn't have to pull any teeth or have any trick questions to get people to communicate. People were eager to share what their experiences were at the firm vis-a-vis equity, diversity, and inclusion. So it allowed us to have a snapshot of what we were to people and what we needed to work on, and that started our whole strategic plan around diversity.
And if I remember correctly, that listening tour went on for 2 weeks?
It was more like 6 months, because I couldn't do right? So I did all of North America.
Oh, wow.
And so it was easily 6 months.
Wow. Okay. So I must have just caught you in that.
I probably did the East Coast run.
Yeah, you might have. You may very well have just kind of done that East Coast run, because I do remember we sat down and we had that conversation. And I remember thinking, you've got all this information. How are you going to kind of divide it and shift it around in order to be able to take action on it. So can you talk a little bit about how that happened? Because that's a culture shift. That's the beginning of culture.
Well, I think so the culture shift starts with making a commitment, a deliberate commitment to do something. And we made a deliberate commitment to become more diverse, inclusive, and equitable. And understanding what that meant, meaning look at everything that we do through that lens. And so we looked at everything we do with that lens. So culture is not just behavior, but it's how do you put it in practice in marketing, in your recruitment and all of that stuff. So we just developed a very tedious, careful, thoughtful plan on how to look at every area through that lens with the help of the staff. It's our employees that really
drove it,
shared with us what was important to them. And it aligned with the values of the firm.
How did that, I'm just thinking about this as you say it, but then I would imagine at some point in time that had to shift how you all thought about corporate investment, what you invested in and how.
Yep. And there weren't too many things that we invested in. If you're talking literally about investments, we don't invest in things that we had to pull out of.
Right.
I think when we made a focused effort many years ago around corporate social responsibility, that's when we put all of that stuff under a microscope. So we didn't have to necessarily rethink that.
But you did you at that time rethink what and how employees were invested in, certain activities or social?
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes,
like that?
Absolutely. So part of the culture, both from a social responsibility point of view and a diversity perspective, we encourage and community involvement, volunteerism, giving back. We're part of what used to be called the 1% solution, where we give 1% of our total billable hours to a not-for-profit or worthy cause, and that's across the board in every office.
Interesting. So we had I'm going to switch gears, albeit slightly, and we got another question, and I want to be able to kind of frame this correctly. So you and I have both been on this journey, and it's the only journey we've been on, quite frankly. But there's two sides to the journey. There are people who are just now becoming aware or more cognizant of race and racism and the impact that it is in this industry. And then there is the perspective of people like yourself and me and other people of color who've just been living it, and it's just Tuesday. So there's two sides of that journey. And we even talked about that in our Black and Brown Girls design call a week or two ago that I believe was put on by Cheryl Durst and IIDA. And it was a great call. There must have been 50 women from all over the world that called into this call with no agenda, we just sat and talked, and we were just able to be ourselves and to kind
breathe.
To breathe. And it was amazing. Just the ability to kind of decompress in our own safe space was amazing. And so I really thank Cheryl for being able to do that. But here was the question that kind of came in because it made me think about that experience when we were on that call. So here's the question. Do you feel it necessary to code switch between your individual identity and mannerisms when acting professionally in a predominantly white industry that is design and construction? And how does that affect you emotionally and mentally?
You did use the term code switch, right?
I did use the term code switch.
First of all, I didn't even know that word.
Me neither.
And I never gave this
either.
Thing that you're describing a name.
Yeah.
It is real. I do not bring my whole self to work. I have, maybe now, but for the large part of my career, I've kept my personal side personal because I never really felt that, not that I didn't think I measured up. Of course I measure up. I didn't want that extra scrutiny put on me by others who didn't look like me. And so I kept that part of me separate, and I only revealed what was necessary to do my job and do my job well. I will say that it made me feel like I was half a person sometimes, for a long time. I'm a social, I laugh, I joke, I cuss, I have fun, I try to have fun at work. And particularly when you're younger, earlier in your career, it was hard to take that risk.
Yeah.
It was real hard. So, you know what, I think those folks, particularly white folks in our profession, for those of you that have had the privilege to not have what you laugh about, what you joke about, what you say and what you share on a personal level, because it mimics and mirrors what your colleague experiences, you're lucky. That was a privilege.
Yeah.
I did not have that.
I didn't have it either. But you know, the funny thing is, much like you, I never gave it a name. All I knew was it was survival.
Yes. And
that I was not going to be accepted within this industry if I revealed my whole self, who I really, truly, authentically was. Now that I'm 55 years old, I really don't care.
Right.
But I'm at a different place in my career. I'm in a different place in my journey in life. But when I was much younger, some of those students that we're trying to attract, I feel and I sense their inability to be comfortable with their whole self.
I'll give you a perfect example. My nickname is Gabby.
Yeah.
No one in my professional world can call me Gabby.
Yes.
Because back in the day, it felt so juvenile.
Yeah.
It sounded jokey. I did not want anybody to, in a position of power or leadership, get to call me Gabby, because it just doesn't sound, And there have been times when people have, when I asked them not to.
Yeah. And I remember when we first became friends, I did it. And then you said, no. You said the only person who gets to do that is if you put your feet up underneath my dining room table at Thanksgiving.
That's right. If you're sitting that's right.
At my table at Thanksgiving, and I was like, okay, we're staying in the box. And over the years, of course, that shifted. But the point's well taken, that who you are and who you always felt that you've had to appear to be has always been done through the lens of trying to make someone else feel accepting and comfortable with who you are.
Or if not accepting, not critical.
Not critical.
Right?
Truly not
and
critical.
Those are two different perspectives. I didn't want to undo
your views.
Looks or labels or anything. Yeah.
Emotionally stressful or not?
Yes, I would say yes. But you put it perfectly, survival, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a survivor.
Yeah.
So yes, survival is stressful, but I'm used to stress, right? So the challenge is we get used to that.
Yeah.
And so when we let loose, when I let loose, I let loose.
Yes, I would tend to agree with that. So we have one other comment, kind of question. This is a long journey. It's 400 years plus of race and racism, institutional practice, structural inequity. It's a long journey. And it's nothing that's going to be solved in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So as we kind of begin to build this culture and shift culture within design and construction and take that lens to our firms and our practices and our industry, what advice do you give?
Be deliberate, be intentional. If you don't intend on advancing your firm in this area, then don't say you are. Right? If you are committed, then be intentional about it and follow through on it. As long as it takes. This is not a sprint, as you said. I think that this is, if we can all agree that this is everyone's challenge in our profession of design, we have a long way to go a long way, and it hasn't been right for a long time. If we accept the fact that it's everybody's responsibility to make it right, then let's accept that and let's all do our part. This is, I would, one cautionary in advice is don't put the burden of education on those Black people or people of color. So educate yourself is probably the number one advice I would give everybody. And then think about the value that this and the change that this will propel in the communities where we work. It will only make our work better if we are designing for the community, by the community, with people that look like the community and are of the community.
It's funny you should say that, because I was talking to another friend of mine and they were saying, I don't know where to start. And I said, read the book, The Hate You Give, and watch the movie The 13th and circle back. And she said, I got it. And so she's off on her journey. You
know, there are several books that have come to mind. The Color of Law, White Fragility. I bought a bunch.
I think we'll put those as resources on our page, so that'll be a good place for people to go and look for additional information. Can you believe it? We're out of time again.
Woohoo!
Well, I want to thank IBI Group for their generous use of their space and for really committing to the pursuit of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. I truly want to thank them for being a partner and a sponsor in this endeavor.
And I want to invite you to join the conversation. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow the conversations on social media. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate you.
Don't drop that oar.
I won't. I promise I won't drop it.